The quiet nanny corrected the Mafia boss. Now he won't let her leave. Kwon Tae-Isen is the most feared man in the city. He breaks laws, he breaks bones, and he breaks spirits. But he has no idea how to talk to a 3-year-old. He thinks fear is the only way to lead. I'm here to show him that respect is earned, even in a house built on secrets. Get out, Elira. I'm busy running a city. You are running a city, sir, but you are failing your son. Lower your voice, or I will take him to the garden, and you will eat dinner alone. The guards froze. They expected me to be fired, or worse. But for the first time in his life, the boss went silent. He didn't look angry. He looked curious. This setup is perfect. It's all about the tension between Tae-Isen's absolute power and Elira's quiet, unshakable principles. In a world where everyone says yes to avoid a bullet, a woman who says no to protect a child is the most dangerous thing he's ever met. The Kwon estate felt more like a prison than a home. The walls were made of cold marble, and the staff moved like ghosts, afraid to make a sound. I had been the nanny for Tae-Isen's son, Min-ho, for only 3 days, and I already knew why the last 5 nannies had quit within a week. Inhuman. These people think money can buy peace. They think if they stay quiet enough, the monster in the office won't notice them. But Min-ho isn't a ghost. He's a little boy who just wants his father to look at him. The shouting started at 6 p.m. Tae-Isen was in his study, his voice booming through the heavy oak doors. Min-ho sat on the floor of the hallway, clutching a toy car, his bottom lip trembling. I don't care what the price is. If they don't pay, burn the whole street down. I didn't think, I just moved. I picked up Min-ho, walked straight to the study, and pushed the doors open. 3 men in suits stood around the desk, their faces pale. Tae-Isen was standing, his tie loose, his eyes glowing with a dark fire. He looked at me as if I were a bug he was about to crush. "Who told you to come in here?" he hissed. "Get the boy and leave, now." I didn't move. I tucked Min-ho's head into my shoulder so he couldn't see his father's face. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his rage like a knife through silk. The room went so still I could hear the air conditioner. The guards at the door reached for their belts. Tae-Isen stepped around the desk, his presence filling the room. He was a foot taller than me, smelling of expensive cologne and old anger. "No?" he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you know who I am, Elira?" "I know you are a man who is scaring his son," I replied, looking him right in the eye. "You are teaching him that power is loud. It isn't. Power is knowing when to be quiet. Until you can speak like a father, you do not get to speak to him at all." I turned around and walked out, closing the heavy doors behind me. My heart was thumping against my ribs, and my hands were shaking. I expected to be dragged out of the house in minutes. But 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the nursery door. It wasn't a guard. It was Tae-Isen. He didn't barge in. He stood in the doorway, looking at Min-ho, who was finally playing quietly. The morning light in the Kwon estate did not bring warmth. It only highlighted the sharp, cold edges of the marble and glass. I was in the nursery, helping Min-ho button his small navy cardigan when the heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. I didn't need to look at the door to know it was him. The very air in the room seemed to pull back, creating a vacuum that only Kwon Tae-Isen could fill. He stood in the doorway, perfectly tailored in a charcoal suit that made him look like a shadow given human form. He didn't look at me at first. His gaze was fixed on his son, who immediately hid behind my leg, clutching the fabric of my skirt. "He needs to learn," Tae-Isen said, his voice a low, vibrating hum. "He is the heir to everything I have built. He cannot spend his life hiding behind a woman's shadow." "He is 3 years old, Mr. Kwon," I replied, my voice calm despite the way my heart hammered against my ribs. "He isn't hiding from the world. He's hiding from the noise you bring into it." Tae-Isen finally turned his eyes to mine. They were the color of flint, hard and sparking with something I couldn't quite name. "Is that so? Then let's see how you handle the noise, Miss Vaughn. We are going to the city. I have a meeting with the heads of the logistics unions. Min-ho will attend, and because he refuses to let go of your hand, you will attend as well." My breath hitched. A business meeting for a man like Tae-Isen wasn't held in a boardroom with coffee and PowerPoint slides. It was a battlefield. "You're using a child to test me," I whispered. "I am testing both of you." He turned on his heel. "The car leaves in 5 minutes. Do not be late." The Lion's Den turned out to be a private club tucked away in the basement of an undescript building in the heart of the city. The walls were lined with dark velvet, and the air was thick with... I felt Min-ho tremble against me. I instinctively wrapped my arms tighter around him, resting my chin on the top of his head. I looked up and saw Tae-Isen's jaw tighten. He sat down slowly, leaning back with a terrifying grace. "The nursemaid, as you call her, is the only person in my house who has the courage to tell me when I am wrong," Tae-Isen said, his eyes locking on to the man with the scar. "And the brat is the future of the Kwon name. If you have something to say that they shouldn't hear, then you shouldn't be saying it at my table." The meeting began, and it was a storm of veiled threats and shouted demands. The men were arguing over shipping routes, their voices rising until the velvet wall seemed to shake. Min-ho whimpered, burying his face in my chest. "Enough!" The man with the scar slammed his fist onto the table. "We want 30% of the port fees, Kwon, or your trucks don't move. We don't care about your family legacy or your rules. We want blood or we want gold." Tae-Isen's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand slowly move toward the inside of his jacket. The guards in the shadows shifted. The air was a hair's breadth away from exploding. "Mr. Kwon," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden silence of the standoff, it sounded like a bell. Everyone at the table turned to look at me, the woman in the simple beige dress holding a shaking child. Tae-Isen looked at me, his eyes narrowed. "Not now, Elira." "The glass," I said, pointing to the water pitcher in the center of the table. "The vibrations from the shouting are making it move toward the edge. If it falls and breaks, Min-ho will be frightened, and if he is frightened, I will have to take him home." I looked at the man with the scar. "And if I take him home, Mr. Kwon will have no reason to stay and listen to your demands. You are shouting to show power, sir, but you are only showing that you cannot control your own temper. How can you manage a port if you cannot manage a dinner?" The man with the scar looked like he was about to explode, but Tae-Isen did something I never expected. He laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that startled everyone in the room. He reached out, moved the water pitcher back to the center of the table, and leaned forward. With soft voice, She's right, Victor. Tae-Isen. The morning routine at the Kwon estate was usually as precise as a clockwork engine. Min-ho would sit at the small oak table in the nursery, picking at his fruit, while I prepared his backpack for the elite preschool he attended, a place for the children of the city's most powerful and dangerous. But this morning, the clockwork was off. Min-ho was unusually still, his small shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the milk in his bowl. "Min-ho, sweetie, it's time for your jacket," I said softly, kneeling beside him. As I reached out to help him stand, my thumb brushed against the hem of his short sleeve. He flinched. It was a tiny movement, but to a nanny it was as loud as a gunshot. I gently pulled the fabric back. There, on the pale skin of his upper arm, was a dark, purplish bruise in the shape of a cruel grip. It wasn't the mark of a fall or a playground stumble. It was the mark of a hand. My heart turned to ice. In this house, violence is the language everyone speaks, but Min-ho was supposed to be the one person protected from it. If Tae-Isen sees this, he won't ask questions. He'll start a war. And a war is the last thing this little boy needs. "Who did this, Min-ho?" I whispered, my heart aching. The boy looked at the door, terrified his father might appear. "Leo says, he says I'm a paper prince. He says my papa is a monster, and monsters don't have real families." I felt a surge of protective rage, but I kept my face calm. Leo was the son of a high-ranking official, a man Tae-Isen was currently doing business with. I knew how the school worked. The teachers turned a blind eye to the bullying because the parents' bank accounts were too large to offend. "Don't tell Papa," Min-ho begged, his eyes filling with tears. "Please, Elira, he'll make Leo disappear, and then everyone will hate me more." "I won't tell him," I promised, kissing his forehead. "But I am going to fix it, my way." When we arrived at the school, I didn't drop Min-ho at the gate. I walked him straight to the classroom. I saw him immediately. Leo, a boy far too large for his age, surrounded by a circle of smaller children. He was holding a toy that clearly didn't belong to him. I waited until the bell rang and the other parents had cleared the hallway. I didn't go to the teacher. I knew she was already bought and paid for. Instead, I waited by the lockers when Leo's father, a man named Director Shin, came to drop off a forgotten lunchbox. "Director Shin?" I called. He stopped, looking at me with a bored expression. "You're the Kwon nanny," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Is there a problem? Does the little prince need a diaper change?" I stepped into his personal space. I wasn't a tall woman, but I had spent years learning how to stand my ground against men far more terrifying than a corrupt bureaucrat. "Your son put his hands on Min-ho Kwon yesterday and left a bruise that your wife would find very difficult to explain to the police." Shin laughed. "It's a playground, Miss Vaughn. Boys will be boys. If the Kwon boy is too soft, that's his father's failing, not mine." "You misunderstand me," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'm not here to complain. I'm here to give you a choice. You have exactly 1 hour to take Leo out of this school and enroll him elsewhere. If he is in this building by noon, I will stop protecting you." "Protecting me," Shin sneered. "From what?" From Tae-Isen, I replied. Right now he doesn't know. I told Min-ho bumped into a door, but if Leo so much as looks at Min-ho again, I will walk into Tae-Isen's study and show him the bruise. I will tell him exactly whose son did it. And we both know that by sunset, your career and perhaps your family's safety will be over. Tae-Isen is a man of many sins, but he is a god when it comes to his son. Shin's face went from red to a sickly pale gray. He looked at the classroom door, then back at me. He saw the cold certainty in my eyes. He knew I wasn't bluffing. You're insane, he hissed, but he was already reaching for his phone. You'd risk a political scandal over a playground scuffle. I'd risk the whole city to keep that boy from crying, I said. You have 55 minutes left. I walked away without looking back. By lunchtime, Leo's locker was empty. That evening, the house was quiet. Tae-Isen was sitting in the living room, a glass of scotch in his hand, watching Min-ho play with his blocks. He looked at me as I entered, his eyes sharp and observant as always. Tae-Isen said, his voice a low rumble. Director Shin called me today. He said he's moving his son to a school in the north. He sounded panicked. He kept apologizing for things I didn't even know happened. I sat down and started organizing Min-ho's books, my back to him. Is that so? Perhaps he just realized the environment wasn't right for his son. Tae-Isen stood up and walked over to me. He reached out, his hand hovering near my shoulder before he pulled it back. He leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. I saw the bruise, Elira, he whispered. I froze. He continued, his voice dropping to a register that made the hair on my arm stand up. I saw it this morning while you were getting his jacket. I was going to kill the father and the son myself. I was waiting for you to come to me, but you didn't. You handled it quietly. You moved a mountain without making a sound. He turned me around to face him. His expression wasn't angry, it was hungry. I told you before that I couldn't let you leave, he said, his thumb brushing my jawline. But I was wrong. It's not just that I won't let you leave. It's that I'm starting to think I can't run this empire without you. But there's a problem, Elira. Shin wasn't just a director. He was the only person keeping the North from attacking our borders. By chasing him away, you've just started a war that I wasn't ready to fight. Outside, the screech of tires echoed through the courtyard, followed by the heavy thud of the front gates being smashed open. And it looks like the sound of the smashed gates was still ringing in the air when the house transformed. The quiet, museum-like halls were suddenly flooded with men in tactical gear, the sharp clack-clack of weapons being readied echoing off the marble floors. Tae-Isen didn't panic. He moved with the cold, calculated precision of a man who had been born in a storm. "Get to the panic room," Tae-Isen commanded, his hand firm on my shoulder for a split second before he pushed me toward the hidden door behind the library shelves. "Take Min-ho. Do not come out until I am the one who opens this door. Do you understand, Elira? Only me." I didn't argue. I scooped up a sleeping Min-ho and vanished into the darkness of the reinforced room. For hours, the world outside was nothing but muffled thuds, the distant rattle of gunfire, and the heavy silence of waiting. I held Min-ho close, humming a soft tune to drown out the sounds of a war I had accidentally accelerated. I came here to be a nanny. I came to teach a child how to be kind. But in this world, kindness is a luxury that gets people killed. I did what was right for Min-ho, but the cost is measured in blood, and I can't help but wonder if Tae-Isen is paying that price right now. The sun was just beginning to bleed through the small reinforced ventilation slits when the heavy steel door finally groaned. I stood up, clutching a heavy brass bookend as a weapon, my breath held tight. The door swung open, and the smell hit me first. Gunpowder, expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. Tae-Isen leaned against the doorframe. His charcoal suit was shredded at the shoulder, and his white shirt was soaked through with crimson. His face was deathly pale, sweat beading on his forehead, but his eyes were still as sharp as flint. "Min-ho?" he gasped, his voice a ragged shadow of its usual self. "He's safe. He's still asleep," I whispered, rushing to his side as he began to slide down the wall. I caught him, his heavy frame nearly knocking me over. "You're hurt. I need to call the doctor." "No," he hissed, grabbing my wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong despite his weakness. "The doctor is compromised. One of the men I trusted was a mole for the North. If I let a stranger near me now, they'll finish what the bullets started." He looked up at me, a grimace of pain twisting his handsome features. "You said you were a special asset in your file, Elira. I know you weren't just a nanny. You have medical training. I saw the certificates hidden in your background check." "Field medicine for a charity in the slums isn't the same as digging a bullet out of a Mafia boss," I countered, but I was already tearing strips of fabric from my apron to create a makeshift bandage. "It will have to be," he groaned, leaning back as I guided him to a chair in the library. "I only trust you. Everyone else sees a crown they can steal. You're the only one who sees a man who needs to get back to his son." I moved with focused intensity. I found the first aid kit hidden in the study and set up a workspace under the dim lamp. The wound was in his upper shoulder, a clean through and through, but the bleeding was heavy. As I began to clean the wound, Tae-Isen's hand clamped onto the arm of the chair, his knuckles turning white. "Talk to me," he gritted out through clenched teeth. "Distract me." "You were reckless," I said, my voice trembling as I poured antiseptic over the wound. "You should have let your guards take the lead." "I don't lead from the back," he panted, "and I had to make sure the path to this room was clear. I couldn't let them get to you, not after you showed me that I could actually have a home here." I looked at him, my hands covered in his blood. The monster of Seoul was sitting in front of me, vulnerable and broken, and for a moment the power dynamic shifted entirely. I wasn't the help, and he wasn't the king. We were just two people caught in a nightmare. "You're a difficult man, Tae-Isen," I whispered, carefully stitching the skin with the precision I usually reserved for mending Min-ho's stuffed animals. "And you're a stubborn woman," he replied, his voice softening as the pain began to numb into a dull ache. He reached out with the good hand, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw, leaving a faint smear of red on my skin. "Why didn't you leave when the gates broke? You could have taken a car and vanished." "I don't leave people behind," I said, meeting his gaze, "especially not people who are finally learning to be human." For the rest of the night, I sat on the floor by his feet, watching his breathing settle. He had fallen into a shallow, feverish sleep, his hand still resting near mine. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, the kind that exists between two soldiers in a trench. Just as the clock struck 4, a low electronic beep came from the computer on Tae-Isen's desk. It was an encrypt. The panic that surged through me was unlike anything I had ever felt. The empty crib on the security monitor felt like a hole in the world. I turned back to Tae-Isen, ready to scream, ready to shake him awake, but his eyes were already open. He had heard the frantic rhythm of my heart. He saw the screen. In an instant, the wounded, vulnerable man was gone, replaced by a ghost of cold fury. "They didn't take him to the border," Tae-Isen rasped, standing up with a wince, his hand clutching his stitched shoulder. "That message is a distraction. They want me to leave the house so they can clean out the vault. Min-ho is still on the grounds. Search the sublevels, now." The next hour was a blur of steel and shadow. We found Min-ho hidden in a laundry chute, terrified but unharmed, guarded by a traitorous maid who had been paid to hand him over. But in the chaos of the recovery, a different tragedy was unfolding. In the center of the grand courtyard, surrounded by silent guards, a young man named Jihu knelt on the cold stone. He was one of the youngest gardeners, a boy barely 19 who had accidentally left a side gate unlocked during the initial attack. In the world of the Kwon Syndicate, there was only one Mafia rule for negligence that led to a security breach: blood for blood. Tae-Isen stood at the top of the marble stairs, the morning sun casting a long, jagged shadow behind him. He looked like an ancient judge. "The rules are the foundation of this house," he said, his voice echoing with a terrifying lack of emotion. "Without them, we are just animals. Jiho, you endangered the air. You know the price." A guard stepped forward, the silver slide of a pistol racking back with a chilling clack. Jihu began to sob, a sound so raw it made my skin crawl. "Stop!" I stepped forward, positioning myself directly between the guard and the boy. "Elira, move," Tae-Isen warned, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "This is not the nursery. This is the Syndicate. If I let him live, I am seen as weak. If I am weak, more people die. This is the law." "Your law is a circle of corpses, Tae-Isen," I shouted, refusing to budge. "He is a child who made a mistake while your house was being bombed. If you kill him for being human, you aren't a leader. You're just a coward hiding behind a tradition of murder." The guards murmured. No one spoke to the boss like this. No one survived it. Tae-Isen descended the stairs slowly, his boots clicking rhythmically on the stone until he was inches from me. The smell of blood and gunpowder still The invitation was etched in gold on heavy black cardstock. A gala hosted by the heads of the 5 major syndicates. It was supposed to be a peace offering, a neutral ground to mend the cracks I had helped create. Tae-Isen had spent the afternoon pacing the library, his hand hovering near his healing shoulder. He didn't want to go, but in his world, an absence was an admission of defeat. "You'll wear the silk," he said, his voice a low, commanding rumble, "and you will stay exactly 3 inches from my right side, no more, no less." "I'm a nanny, Tae-Isen, not a trophy," I reminded him, though I was already reaching for the dress. "Tonight you are the woman who made the Lion of Seoul break his own laws," he replied, his eyes dark with a mix of pride and worry. "That makes you the most interesting person in the room, and in this room, interesting usually means dead." The gala was a sea of shimmering gowns and cold, calculating eyes. As we entered the ballroom, the whispers followed us like a trail of smoke. I felt the weight of 1,000 stares, but Tae-Isen's arm around my waist was a steady, warm anchor. "Kwon," a voice smooth as oil called out. A man stepped from the shadows of the balcony. It was Boss Jin, the leader of the northern factions. He was older, his hair a shock of silver, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. And this must be the famous Miss Vaughn, the woman who tames monsters. "She is my staff, Jin, nothing more," Tae-Isen lied, though his grip on my waist tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course," Jin chuckled. "Then surely you won't mind if I steal her for a moment to discuss educational charities. I hear she is quite the expert on child welfare." Before Tae-Isen could refuse, a waiter accidentally tripped, spilling a tray of champagne glasses near our feet. In the 3 seconds of chaos, Jin's men stepped between us, subtly pushing Tae-Isen toward a group of waiting council members. I was swept away toward the balcony, the crowd closing like a curtain behind me. "You have a very delicate position, Elira," Jin said, his voice dropping the friendly act as soon as we were alone. He leaned against the railing, looking out over the city. "Tae-Isen is becoming soft because of you. He is becoming a human being," I snapped, looking for a way back into the room. "Human beings bleed easily," Jin said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, high-resolution photograph. He slid it across the marble railing. My heart stopped. It was a photo of me, years ago, standing in front of a medical clinic in a war zone. But beside me was a man whose face had been blurred out. My father. "We know who your father was, Elira. We know why you're really hiding in Seoul. If Tae-Isen finds out that his merciful Nanny is the daughter of the man who stole 50 million from the Syndicate's offshore accounts, do you think he'll still be protecting you? Or will he be the one holding the gun?" The room felt like it was spinning. I looked through the glass doors and saw Tae-Isen. He was scanning the crowd, his face a mask of escalating panic. He wasn't looking for a business partner, he was looking for a lifeline. When his eyes finally found mine through the glass, the raw desperation in his expression shattered my heart. He didn't care about the gala. He didn't care about the peace treaty. He shoved aside a council elder and charged toward the balcony, his hand reaching for me as if I were slipping off a cliff. "Get away from her, Jin," Tae-Isen roared, his voice cracking the elegant atmosphere of the room. Jin smiled, tucked the photo back into his pocket, and leaned in close to my ear. "The clock is ticking, Miss Vaughn. Tell him the truth, or I will. Let's see how much his love is worth when he realizes you're the biggest lie of all." Tae-Isen reached the balcony and pulled me into his arms, his chest heaving as if he had run a marathon. He tucked my head under his chin, his hands shaking as they smoothed my hair. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a vulnerability that terrified me. "I couldn't breathe, Elira. I looked around and you weren't there, and for a second the world just went black." He pulled back, searching my face, his eyes full of a terrifyingly honest devotion. "I don't care about the rules anymore. I don't care about the empire. I can't do this without you." I looked at him, the weight of the secret in my pocket feeling like a lead weight. I wanted to tell him, I wanted to scream the truth, but as I looked into the eyes of the man who had just told the world he couldn't breathe without me, I realized that my past wasn't just a secret, it was a death sentence for the only man I had ever truly loved. The air in the Kwon estate had turned cold, or perhaps it was just the ice settling into my bones. Ever since the gala, the photograph in Boss Jin's pocket had haunted my every waking thought. Tae-Isen had doubled the guard around me, thinking he was protecting me from outside enemies. He didn't realize the greatest threat was already inside the walls, sitting at his table, bathing his son, and keeping his secrets. Late that night, when the house was draped in shadows and the only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock, I found myself standing before the heavy oak doors of the forbidden library. Tae-Isen was away on an emergency trip to the docks, and for the first time the keypad glowed with a code I had memorized by watching his fingers move. Min-ho's birthday. The door clicked open with a soft, mechanical hiss. I shouldn't be here. I should take Min-ho and run before the truth burns us both. But a house built on lies is just a decorated grave. I need to know if the man I've started to love is the same man who destroyed my father. I bypassed the sensors and moved toward the floor-to-ceiling shelves. Behind a row of ancient leather-bound books lay the master safe. My hands shook as I entered the secondary code. The heavy door swung open, revealing stacks of cash, ledgers, and a single thick folder bound in black ribbon. The label read, Operation Fallen Star. I opened it, and the world seemed to tilt. Inside were surveillance photos of a modest house in the suburbs, my childhood home. There were bank statements, wire transfer records, and a final bloody report. My father hadn't just stolen money from the Syndicate. He had been their lead accountant, the man who knew where every cent of their blood money was buried. He had tried to whistleblow to the authorities, and the Kwon Syndicate, led by Tae-Isen's father, had moved to silence him. But it was the last page that broke me. It was a signed order to liquidate the asset. The signature at the bottom wasn't the old boss's. It was a younger, sharper scrawl that I recognized from every contract and school permission slip in the house. Kwon Tae-Isen. I wondered how long it would take you to find it. I gasped, the folder slipping from my numb fingers, papers scattered. The explosion at the gates wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force that rattled my teeth and shattered the tall windows of the library. Glass rained down like diamond dust, glinting in the red emergency lights that had begun to pulse through the halls. Tae-Isen didn't wait for my answer. He pressed the pistol into my hand, his fingers lingering on mine for a heartbeat, a silent plea for forgiveness, or perhaps just a goodbye. The library safe has a secondary exit, Tae-Isen shouted over the rising din of gunfire. It leads to the barracks. Find Captain Han. Tell him Code Black. He will give you command of the interior perimeter. I have to draw their fire to the front, or they'll level the house with us inside. Tae-Isen, wait! I reached out, grabbing his sleeve. The anger over my father was still a roaring fire in my chest, but the thought of Tae-Isen walking into that hail of lead made my stomach drop. If I don't make it, he said, leaning in to press his forehead against mine, everything I own is in Min-ho's name, and you are the only one who can keep him from becoming like me. Go! I ran. I didn't look back. I found Min Ho in the nursery, huddled under his bed, clutching the stuffed lion Tae-Isen had given him. I scooped him up, heavy and warm, and sprinted toward the barracks. Captain Han and his team were already arming themselves, their faces grim. When I burst in, shouting the code, they didn't hesitate. Tae-Isen had told them that in a crisis, my voice was his. "The boss is at the front gate," I told Han, my voice hard and steady. "Jin's men are coming through the gardens. We need to set up a crossfire in the grand foyer. If they get past the stairs, they get the boy. I want 2 men on the balcony and the rest behind the marble pillars." "You heard her," Han roared. "Move!" The siege was a nightmare of strobe lights and screaming metal. From my position at the top of the stairs, I watched the monitors. Tae-Isen was a shadow in the smoke, moving with a terrifying lethality, but he was being pushed back. Jin's forces were too many. I am the daughter of a man who dealt in numbers, and I am the nanny to a man who deals in blood. Today, I have to be both. I have to count the bullets and spend them wisely. "Captain, the thermal sensors show a breach in the kitchen," I shouted into the radio. "They're trying to flank us through the servants' entrance." I left Min Ho with a trusted guard in the panic room and grabbed a headset. I wasn't just watching, I was directing. I used the house's security system like a chessboard, opening and closing electronic doors to trap Jin's men in isolated hallways. I turned off the lights in the kitchen, giving Han's night vision-equipped team the advantage. "Now!" I commanded. The sound of the engagement was brief and brutal. We held the kitchen, we held the foyer, but the front of the house was a different story. The monitors showed Tae-Isen pinned down behind The air in the hallway turned to ice as I looked into the eyes of the traitor. It was Director Shin, the man whose son I had chased away, the man I thought was a coward. He had used the blackout to slip through the service tunnels, fueled by a desperation that made him more dangerous than any soldier. His hand trembled as he held the blade against Min Ho's neck. "You took my life, Miss Vaughn," Shin hissed, his eyes bloodshot. "You took my son's future. Now I take the only thing the great Kwon Tae-Isen loves." Tae-Isen moved, but I raised my hand to stop him. One wrong step and the blade would slip. I looked at Min Ho. The boy wasn't crying. He was looking at me, his eyes wide, trusting me to be the shield I had always been. "Shin," I said, my voice dropping to that quiet, iron tone that had first silenced Tae-Isen. "The accounts are dead. The money you were promised for this betrayal is gone. If you kill that boy, you aren't just a murderer. You are a dead man with nowhere to hide. But if you put the knife down, I will give you the one thing Tae-Isen won't, a head start." "Don't listen to her," Tae-Isen growled, his hand white on the grip of his gun. "Shut up, Tae-Isen," I barked, not taking my eyes off Shin. "Look at him, Shin. Look at me. I am the daughter of the man this syndicate murdered. If anyone has a reason to want blood, it's me. But I'm choosing peace. Put the knife down, and I'll give you the key to the back gate. You have 5 minutes before the backup arrives." The silence was deafening. Shin looked at the terrifying power of Tae-Isen, then at the calm, steady gaze I offered. Slowly, his hand began to shake. The knife clattered to the marble floor. I didn't wait. I lunged forward, snatching Min Ho into my arms and shielding him with my body. Tae-Isen moved like a blur, his men swarming Shin and dragging him into the darkness. But Tae-Isen didn't follow them. He fell to his knees beside me, his arms wrapping around both of us,